When we say that a cell is the building block of all living things, we are partially right. They are these units that work together to make life as we know it. However, if we look deeper, even deeper, even deeper, we will find that the building blocks of everything are atoms. Now, what is an atom? Everything in the world and universe is made of matter, which is this thing that has mass and occupies space. Now take matter, break it down to its smallest components, and you're left with what we call elements, different types of elements. Now if we take elements and break them even further down, we can see that they are made up of atoms, which in turn are composed of smaller parts called subatomic particles. Now, atoms from the same element have the same number of subatomic particles, but that's not true every time. Some atoms from the same element differ in the number of subatomic particles, and when that happens, we call them isotopes. I know it's a lot to take in, but I will be taking you through some of those terms throughout this and other videos that will come up on this channel. But today, we will mainly focus on the atom. So an atom is the smallest whole, stable part of an element that still holds all the known characteristics of an element. And as we said before, every atom is made up of smaller pieces called subatomic particles. And they are three: electrons, protons, and neutrons. The atom is made up of a nucleus in its core of protons and neutrons surrounded by a cloud of electrons. Protons and neutrons have mass. Protons carry a positive charge, while neutrons, as the name says, have no charge. Well, they're neutral. For that reason, since protons are positive and neutrons are neutral, we can say that the nucleus has a positive net charge. When we calculate the mass of atoms and molecules, we consider the mass of each proton and neutron as equal to 1 unit. Now let's leave the nucleus to talk about what surrounds it, electrons. Because everything in life needs some balance, if the nucleus has a positive charge, we have to have some negative charges. And the electrons will do that. They carry a negative charge, but have almost no mass when compared to protons and neutrons. The mass of an electron is just 0.054% of the mass of a neutron. That is why we usually don't consider the mass of electrons when calculating the mass of atoms and molecules. The most important properties of atomic and molecular structure can be shown using a simplified picture of an atom that is called the Bohr model. I'm talking about Niels Bohr, who proposed this model in 1915. It is not completely correct, but it has many characteristics that are approximately correct to the currently accepted model of an atom. So in this video, we will use Bohr's model of an atom to show some relevant characteristics of an atom. Let's take carbon as an example. The most common form of carbon has 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons. We can draw the nucleus as a circle and add 6 zeros representing the neutrons and 6 plus signs for protons. Then draw these two lines with 6 negative charges representing the electrons in a carbon atom's cloud. And each line represents a shell. And you can see that on one shell we can have 2 electrons, and on the other we find then 4. The other way to draw a carbon atom is by writing 6p and 6n in the center for protons and neutrons respectively. Then 2 electrons represented by 2 dots in an inner shell and 4 dots for electrons in the outer shell. We can use these drawings to also show how 2 atoms can form a bond and become a molecule. And this time we'll use oxygen as an example. Oxygen has 8 protons 8 neutrons and 8 electrons. Let's draw another oxygen atom here. Molecules of oxygen are made up of 2 oxygen atoms that bind to one another through what we call a covalent bond, which essentially means that 2 electrons are shared between the atoms to form this bond, like we see depicted in our drawing. Note, however, that oxygen has 2 covalent bonds. Atoms tend to share electrons to make each other more stable. We will go over this in more detail when we talk about molecules on a separate video. Atoms can lose or gain electrons. When they do that, they are called ions. Negative ions have more electrons than protons, while positive ions have fewer electrons than protons. Now let's have a look at a practical example of ions. Sodium chloride, also commonly known as table salt, is formed when sodium atoms interact with chlorine atoms. And when this occurs, sodium will give an electron to chlorine. And remember that an electron is a negatively charged particle. For that reason, sodium will become slightly positive and chlorine slightly negative. Now note here that the ion of chlorine is now called chloride. Together though, NaCl or sodium chloride is neutral because the +1 charge is balanced by the -1 charge. The bond between sodium and chloride is called ionic bond. But when mixed in, for example, water, sodium and chloride will separate as ions. And that is it for this video. Now you should know what an atom is. But before you go, don't forget to like this video and let us know if you would like to see more of these videos in this channel. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a thing, and I'll see you next time.